The air was dry and heavy with the smell of iron and oil. The sky burned orange as the sun sank behind the jagged towers of the industrial farms. Endless fields of silver crops stretched to the horizon. Between the tall stalks, giant machines crawled like metal beasts, their blades spinning and shrieking as they cut down everything in their path. A small figure stood at the edge of the field. She was young, maybe no more than 12 in human years. Her skin carried a soft blue tone that shimmered under the dying light. Her eyes were wide, not from wonder but from fear. Her thin hands clutched the edge of her ragged shawl as she watched her family walk away. They did not look back, not even once, their long cloaks dragged across the dirt as they returned to the settlement walls. She wanted to call to them to ask why they were leaving her here, but her voice caught in her throat like a stone. The machines roared closer. The ground trembled under her bare feet. She could see the glint of the harvester's blades, catching the last light of the sun. They spun so fast they blurred into a silver storm. Every few seconds, a sharp crash rang out as the machine tore through the stalks. She stood frozen. Her mind whispered that maybe this was what they wanted. Maybe this was where unwanted children went. The wind blew dust across her face, tears formed, but she forced them back. Crying would not stop the blades far across the field. A human worker was finishing his shift. His name was Jace. He had been repairing the outer irrigation lines all day. His boots were caked with dust, and his hands were black with grease. He just wanted to go home, eat something warm, and sleep. He saw movement where there should be none. A small shape standing alone near the edge of Harvester Route 9. At first he thought it was a scare drone malfunctioning. Then the wind shifted, and he saw the figure clearly. Not a drone. A child. Jace froze for a moment, unsure if his tired eyes were lying. Then he saw the harvester behind her. It was closing fast. His chest tightened. He dropped his tools and ran. The girl heard something pounding the ground behind her. She turned her head slightly. A man in a torn work suit was sprinting toward her. His arms flailed as he shouted, his voice almost lost under the screaming blades. She did not move. Her people had told her that humans were dangerous, that they would harm her if she came too close. Maybe this was part of the punishment. Maybe the man was coming to make sure the machine finished its work. Jace's lungs burned as he pushed harder. He waved his arms high to get her attention. The machine's automated sensors should have stopped if it detected a living body. But it was an old model, unreliable. He had seen it, cut through stray livestock before without slowing. The distance between them closed. The machine was almost on her. The wind from its blades whipped her hair across her face. She stood like stone. Too scared to even blink. Jace threw himself forward. He crashed into her and wrapped his arms around her small body. Together they rolled across the dirt just as the harvester screamed past. The blades sliced the air where she had been standing. Dust swallowed them. The ground shook as the machine screeched. To a halt and shut down, Jace lay there gasping, holding the trembling girl against his chest. His heart hammered like a drum. She did not struggle. She did not cry. She only stared at nothing with wide, empty eyes, as if she had already accepted death and did not understand why it had not come. Jace slowly sat up, his arms still around her to keep her steady. He checked her arms and legs for wounds. No blood. No broken bones. Only thin scratches where her shawl had torn. He reached for his water flask and held it out. She did not take it. Her eyes flicked to it and back to the ground like a wild creature expecting a trap. Jace spoke gently, his words soft and slow. "It is all right. You are safe now." She blinked. A tear slid down her cheek, not from relief, from confusion, as if she had never heard those words before. Jace wrapped his worn jacket around her shoulders. She was light as air, her ribs pressed through her thin skin. He stood, holding her carefully in his arms. The field was silent now except for the creak of the cooling harvester. He looked toward the settlement walls in the distance. The people who had left her were long gone. They had not even turned to see if she lived. Jace tightened his grip. Whatever story had brought her here, it was not going to end in this field. He started walking, his steps slow but steady. The dying sun painted their shadows long across the steel-colored ground. Behind them, the harvester stood silent like a defeated monster. Ahead of them, the first stars began to appear. She rested her head against his chest, her breath shallow, her eyes half closed. Jace kept walking through the darkening field. He did not know who she was. He only knew one thing: she would not be left behind again. The metal field was quiet now. Only the faint hiss of cooling engines came from the stopped harvester. Jace stood still, his arms wrapped around the small alien girl. She was weightless in his grip. Her skin was cold like morning frost. He could feel her heart beating too fast, like a trapped bird. Her eyes stared past him as if she could not believe she was still alive. Jace knelt down slowly and placed her on her feet. Her legs shook. She almost fell again. He kept one hand on her shoulder, gentle but firm. He wanted her to know she was safe. The girl did not speak. Her lips moved slightly as if forming words that never left her mouth. Jace glanced toward the distant settlement walls. Still no one came who leaves a child in front of moving blades. The thought burned through him. He pushed it away for now. She needed help more than his questions. He crouched too, her eye level. His voice was soft. "Are you hurt?" She blinked once, then shook her head. Relief washed through him. He offered his water flask again. This time she touched it with trembling fingers. She sipped like she had never tasted clean water before. The tension in her shoulders eased for a moment. Jace let her drink while he scanned the field. The harvester was still sitting there, its warning lights blinking dull red. Soon the field drones would arrive to investigate the emergency stop. He could not let them find her here. He reached for his comm to call off the drones, then stopped. If he reported a living, non-registered alien child, the system would mark her as illegal property. They would take her away. She would disappear into the industrial processing camps. He had seen what happened there. No, he could not let that happen. Jace slipped his comm back into his belt. He looked at the girl again. She was staring at him now. Her eyes were bright and sharp under the dust, cautious, ready to run, but also searching. Trying to understand why he had pulled her from death, Jace stood and offered his hand. "Come with me." Her head tilted slightly. Her people had taught her that humans did not offer hands. Humans took. They grabbed, they claimed. But this hand waited, not forcing, only waiting. She stepped forward. Her small hand slid into his. Her skin was cool and smooth like glass. Jace closed his fingers gently around hers. Not tight, just enough to guide her. They walked across the silent field. The sun had vanished now. The air turned sharp and cold. Lights flickered in the distance as the settlement powered up for night. Jace kept glancing over his shoulder. Any drone could appear at any moment. The girl stayed close beside him. Her steps were light but quick, like she feared he might vanish if she fell behind once she stumbled on a broken pipe. Jace caught her before she hit the ground. She looked up at him in surprise, as if no one had ever caught her before. They reached the outer fence. Jace pulled the loose panel aside and helped her through. The smell of metal and fuel grew stronger. Rusting storage tanks loomed like giant shadows. This place was the edge of the world, and it was the only place he could hide her. She shivered under his old jacket. Jace noticed how her hands curled inward as if guarding an invisible wound. He spoke again. "Do you have a name?" She stayed silent. Her eyes lowered. It was all right, she could tell him later. Right now she needed warmth and safety. He could give her that. Jace led her down the narrow path between the tanks. His small workshop sat at the far corner, a dented shed made of welded scrap. The door creaked as he pushed it open. Warm light spilled out from a single old lamp inside. The girl hesitated. At the threshold, her eyes flicked to the shadows. Jace stepped in first, then turned and held out his hand again. She followed, the smell of oil and metal wrapped around them. Jace closed the door. The outside world faded behind the thin metal walls. E pulled out an old blanket from a crate and laid it near the warm pipe. She stood still while he guided her down to sit. Her small frame curled tight like a coiled wire. Jace knelt beside her. "You are safe here." His voice was steady. She gave a tiny nod for the first time since he found her. Her eyes closed. Not in sleep. In relief, Jace sat back on the cold floor, his heart still racing. He knew this was only the beginning. Saving her from the blades had been the easy part. Keeping her hidden from the world would be much harder. The shed was small and old. Sheets of patched metal groaned softly whenever the wind touched them. Inside, the air carried the scent of oil and smoke. A single lamp hummed above a worn work table scattered with broken machine parts. The alien girl sat curled on the floor beside the warm pipe. She wrapped the old blanket around her shoulders like armor. Her large eyes flicked around the room. Every sound made her tense. Every shadow made her shrink. Smaller. Jace worked quietly across the shed. He fixed a cracked water valve with slow and steady hands. He did not speak. He knew words could be sharp. He knew silence was safer for her right now. Sometimes she peeked over the edge of the blanket, watching how he moved. He never rushed. He never slammed tools. Even when a piece slipped from his hand, he only sighed and picked it up again. Her people had never been gentle. This was new. That first night, she did not sleep. Jace pretended not to notice. He gave her space. He left a bowl of soup near the blanket and sat on the opposite side of the shed. Hours passed before she finally touched the spoon. She ate in silence while keeping her eyes on him, ready to flee if he came closer. When dawn came, Jace opened the door. The cold light slid inside and brushed her skin. She flinched, then slowly relaxed when nothing happened. Days passed like that. Quiet, careful. Jace would go out to repair field machines and come back with scraps. He always brought something small for her. A slice of fruit, a clean cloth, a small wrench to hold while he worked. At first, she only watched from her corner, but soon she began to crawl closer when he worked. She would sit near the table and stare at the spinning gears. Sometimes she reached out to touch the tools when he was not looking. The cold weight of metal fascinated her. It felt real solid. Not like the shifting ground of her old life. One evening, a scream tore through the shed. Jace dropped his wrench and ran to her. She was thrashing in the blanket, eyes wide open, tears streaming. A nightmare had caught her in its claws. Jace knelt and held her shoulders gently. "It is all right. You are here, you are safe." His voice was steady, like the hum of the lamp. Slowly, her breathing eased. The terror faded from her eyes. She sagged against him. Too exhausted to resist, Jace stayed beside her until the lamp burned low. He did not sleep. He kept watch, while she finally drifted into a quiet slumber. When the sun rose, she was still curled on the floor, but her face was calm. No more fear lines carved into her small features. That morning, something changed. She did not return to her corner. She stayed near his side as he worked. She held the light for him while he repaired an old pump. Her hands trembled at first, but when the machine hissed to life, she let out a small breath of wonder. Jace smiled at her, not wide, just enough to let her know she had done well. She looked away quickly, but a faint spark shone in her eyes. That night they ate together at the table. She did not sit on the floor anymore. She sat across from him, silent but present, her hands no longer clenched like fists. The world outside the shed was still sharp and cold, but inside this small cage of rust and light, a fragile seed of trust had begun to grow. The shed was no longer silent. Tiny sounds of life filled the air. The soft clink of tools, the quiet scratch of metal on metal, and sometimes a small laugh that slipped from the alien girl before she could stop it. She had stopped hiding in the corner. Now she stood beside Jace while he worked. Her thin fingers passed him bolts and screws. Her wide eyes followed every move of his hands. Jace spoke gently as he worked, naming each part, explaining each motion. She listened like each word was treasure. At first she only nodded, but soon she whispered questions. Her voice was small, shaky yet curious. Jace answered every question with patience. He never laughed when she got things wrong. He simply showed her again. One afternoon he gave her a cracked water pump. "Show me what you remember." She stared at the broken shell. Her hands hesitated. Then slowly she began to copy his steps, unbolting the frame, cleaning the filter, fitting the new seal. The pump hissed and rattled. Then the valve clicked and water began to flow. She gasped softly. A smile flickered across her face like sunlight breaking through clouds. Jace grinned. "You fixed it." Her cheeks flushed a faint silver glow. She turned her face away, but her shoulders lifted, with pride. That night something rare happened. She laughed. A real laugh. Jace had slipped on an oil patch and dropped a wrench into a bucket. The clatter was loud. He looked so startled that she burst out laughing. The sound echoed inside the shed, like music. She quickly covered her mouth. Jace only laughed with her. They began to share small meals at the table, bread warmed on the heat pipe, sweet fruit from the outer gardens. She no longer stared at the door. She watched him instead. Her shoulders, no longer hunched as if expecting a blow. But the world outside the shed had not forgotten. Rumors were spreading in the settlement. Workers whispered about strange shapes near the old tanks. The council spoke quietly about missing rations and stolen tools. Patrol drones started sweeping the outer fields more often. Their red lights glowed like hungry eyes in the night sky. Jace noticed the change. He watched the drones circle lower each evening. He tightened the locks on the shed door. He told her to stay quiet whenever he left. She nodded each time, but fear crept back into her eyes. One evening as they ate, a distant siren wailed. The sound froze her in place. Jace set his food down and listened. The siren faded. Only wind remained. She whispered, "Are they coming?" Her voice trembled. "Not yet." His reply was calm, but his eyes stayed on the door. The world was closing in. They both felt it inside the shed. They had found warmth, but outside, cold metal teeth were waiting. The spark of trust between them had grown brighter, but so had the danger around them. The night air was sharp and cold. The wind carried the smell of metal and smoke from the distant fields inside the shed. The lamp flickered. The girl sat near the warm pipe with her knees pulled close. Jace sat at the table with his head low over a map of the outer sector. He had seen the patrol drones again, lower this time. Their red lights swept close to the tanks. Too close. The settlement council had started asking questions. Someone had reported strange tracks near the old scrapyard. Someone else had said they heard movement after curfew. Rumors grew like weeds, and the council listened when rumors spoke of danger. Jace folded the map and looked at her. She was tracing patterns on the dusty floor with one finger. She looked calm, but her ears twitched at every sound outside. She was listening the way hunted things listen. Jace stood and walked to the small window. A beam of red light swept across the far wall. A drone was circling again. He shut the curtain and locked the door. "We cannot. Stay here." His voice was low. She looked up at him, her eyes wide. "Where will we go? Away from here somewhere. The council cannot find you." Her fingers tightened on the edge of the blanket. Fear flickered across her face, but she nodded. She did not ask. What would happen to him if they caught her? She already knew. The next day the shed grew tense. Jace moved with quiet speed. He packed tools into crates, gathered old ration packs, checked the hidden fuel cells beneath the floor. She tried to help, but her hands trembled every time she heard a distant engine. She froze. Jace placed a hand on her shoulder. "We will be fast. We will be quiet. We will be safe." That evening, heavy boots echoed outside the shed. They both froze. Jace pulled her toward the hidden crawlspace beneath the floor. She slid inside and curled into the shadows. Dust coated her skin. Her small eyes glimmered in the dark. The door creaked open. Voices filled the shed. Two council guards stepped inside. Their suits clinked with metal plates. They swept the room with scanners. Jace stood calm by the work table. He forced his voice steady. Looking for something. Routine search. The guard's tone was cold. Reports of missing supplies out here. Jace shrugged. Only broken junk here. Nothing worth stealing. They prowled through the shed, kicked at crates, shoved aside blankets. The scanner beeped when it passed near the floor. Jace coughed to cover the sound, dropped a wrench, made it clatter across the ground. The guard turned away from the crawlspace. After a few tense minutes, they left. The door slammed shut behind them. Jace knelt and lifted the hatch. She crawled out shaking. Her breath came in fast, sharp gasps. Jace wrapped his jacket around her. "It is all right, they are gone." She pressed her face into the worn cloth. She said nothing, but her arms clung to him like she would fall apart without his hold. That night they sat together in silence. The lamp hummed softly. Outside, the wind howled across the tanks. Jace knew the council would not stop. They would come back. They would search again. Next time they might not leave. He looked at her small, tired face. "We leave tomorrow." Her eyes lifted to meet his. She nodded without fear this time. They had stopped running inside, but now they would run for real. The world was silent before the storm. Cold night air wrapped the scrapyard in darkness. Jace moved quickly through the shadows. The alien girl stayed close behind him. Her thin feet made no sound on the metal floor they had left. The shed, an hour after the last patrol passed, Jace carried a small pack with food and tools. She carried nothing, only the heavy weight of fear. The launch yard lay across the abandoned tunnels. They had to reach it before sunrise. Before the council blocked the cargo bay gates, Jace stopped at the edge of a broken pipe bridge. The ground below glowed faint orange from molten slag. Heat rose in waves. He knelt and checked the old cables. Still strong enough to cross, he looked at her. "Stay close." She nodded. They crawled across the narrow bridge. The metal burned their hands. Sparks hissed from the cracks below. The smell of smoke clung to their clothes. Halfway across, a low siren echoed through the yard. She froze. Jace grabbed her hand. "Keep moving," they ran as the siren grew louder. Red lights flashed across the distant towers. Boots thundered somewhere behind them. Guards were coming. They dove into a collapsed tunnel. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Jace pulled her through the narrow gap. A stun bolt struck the wall near her head. She gasped. Jace pushed her forward. The tunnel twisted through darkness. Old machines loomed like sleeping giants. Guards shouted behind them. Bolts of blue light cut the shadows. Jace shoved a rusted cart into the path to slow them down. She stumbled and fell. Jace caught her arm before she hit the ground. She was shaking. "I can run." Her voice cracked, but her eyes blazed. They burst out of the tunnel into the loading yard. Engines roared from the transport ships. Bright lights cut across the ground. Smoke curled from the launch vents. Jace dragged her toward the smallest cargo ship. Its hatch stood open. They were 10 steps away when more guards appeared at the far gate. "Run." His voice was sharp. They sprinted. Across the open ground, stun fire cracked behind them. Blue light sliced the air. Jace shielded her with his body. A bolt struck his shoulder. He stumbled but kept moving. She grabbed his arm and pulled with all her strength. They reached the ramp as the ship engines screamed. The heat burned their skin. Jace slammed the hatch controls. The door began to close. Guards charged toward them. Too late. The ramp sealed with a heavy thud. The outside world vanished. Jace collapsed against the wall, breathing hard. His shoulders smoldered from the burn. The girl knelt beside him with wide, frantic eyes. He gave her a tired smile. "We made it." The ship lifted from the ground. The vibration shook the floor under their feet. The engines roared like thunder. Gravity pressed them down as the cargo bay trembled. Through a small window they watched the planet fall away. Lights of the settlement grew small, then vanished into the black sea of space. She clutched his hand and held it tight. Her chest rose and fell in. Quick bursts. She did not speak. She only stared at the stars. Jace leaned back against the wall. His eyes closed for a moment. They were free. For now. Silence filled the small cargo ship. Only the soft hum of the engines floated through. The air, the stars spread like silver dust. Beyond the window, each one burned quietly in the endless. Dark, the alien girl, sat near the window wrapped in Jace's jacket. Her eyes were wide. Not with fear this time, with wonder. Had never seen the stars from above the clouds. They looked close enough to touch her. Reflection shone faint in the glass, fragile. But alive Jace sat on the floor with his back against the wall. His injured shoulder was wrapped in cloth. He watched her quietly. The lines of worry on his face had softened for the first time in days. He was not planning their next move. He was just breathing. Turned and crawled closer. Her small hands touched his burned arm. Does it hurt? Only a little. His voice was calm. She leaned her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. It was warm. Strong, safe. Jace lifted his other arm and placed it around her shoulders. We will find a place. Her voice was small. Yes, a place where no one can take you away, where no one can leave you behind. Her eyes glimmered like liquid silver in the dim light. I want to help you, Will. We will build it together. She looked up at him. There was a faint smile on her face, not the quick, nervous smile she had shown before. This one was soft and real. Jace reached into his pack and pulled out an old navigation slate. He placed it in her hands. Choose a star, anyone. We will call it home. She stared at the glowing map. Her finger hovered above the endless lights. Then she touched one far from the world. They had escaped far from everything that had ever hurt her. That one, she whispered. Jace nodded. Then that one it is. The ship drifted on, through the dark. The stars wrapped around them like a quiet sea. The girl closed her eyes and rested in his arms. Her breath slowed. Her body finally at peace. Jace watched the star she had chosen grow brighter on the screen. It was small, lonely, but waiting. They were no longer running. They were traveling together, and somewhere beyond the cold, black sky, a home was waiting for them.